Today I'm going to be talking through all of the books I read for the month of July. July was a fine reading month. Nothing too much happened for my month. I got my hair done and then didn't brush it anymore. We got another heat wave. That's exciting. And I got vaccinated. I got my second vaccine actually, so I'm fully vaccinated as of filming, which is very exciting. I got very sick after the fact, which is too bad, but that's okay. So in terms of like quantity of reading, I did pretty good. In terms of quality of reading, I think I read my least favorite book of the year, and the others are kind of like it was just so reading. Whereas last month I feel like I didn't read a lot, but the books I did read I really enjoyed. Kind of had the opposite effect this month. So the first book I read was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I would love to hold it up, but I can't because I finished it and immediately gave it away to a coworker of mine. It was just, to sum it up, I rated it 1 out of 5 stars. I really didn't enjoy it. I thought it was really, just from the hop, very silly. I thought it was ridiculous. The premise that is set up, so taking you through the premise and without any spoilers, the story takes place, or it starts on a campus, and the premise is a young lady's roommate gets killed by a campus serial killer, and she is having sort of a mental breakdown and decides she needs to get home immediately. She apparently can't even wait 3 days for the weekend. She needs to go. Even though the attack didn't just happen yesterday, for some reason, as the story sets, the girl just has to go back away because it's torturous to live there without her roommate. And we see that she's carrying a lot of guilt, both because she kind of left her roommate on a night out that she didn't really want to go on, but her roommate convinced her to, so she left her. And when she abandoned her roommate on that night out is the night, of course, that she unfortunately gets attacked and murdered. But just the whole theme was silly. The fact her boyfriend couldn't drive her because he is a TA or an RA, I can't quite remember, so he has responsibilities at the school, and even though he probably could take like a mental health day, right? Like, it's an academic setting. You can take a mental health day and say, I gotta drive my girlfriend home, but that's fine. She decides to get in a car with an absolute stranger, doesn't even know his name, and something fishy is afoot, she guesses pretty quickly. So, and it was just like, honestly, the way I describe it is M. Night Shyamalan movies tend to be very polarizing because his twist, audience will either love it and it will make the movie, or the twist is something the audience will hate and therefore they'll wind up not liking Shyamalan's movie. This was like a Shyamalan nightmare, and you take M. Night Shyamalan and Inception and mix them together. It was just twist after twist after twist after subsidiary plot trying to come forward, another twist. It was just the most ridiculous thriller I had ever read. At one point, I was actually reading it out loud to my partner, and we were just laughing at like what twist can come out next. And at one point, I made a joke of the most ridiculous twist I could think of, and that turned out to be the ending. So 1 out of 5. Would not recommend. I gave it to a coworker and said, this is the worst book I've ever read. So enjoy. So on another note, the next book I read was The Maidens. This is the same author that wrote The Silent Patient, which I rated a 2 out of 5 star. It wasn't my favorite, again, just because of the ending. I didn't really understand the intention of why, when we get the reveal, what spurred the main character to do what they did without giving anything away. But The Maidens, I actually really enjoyed. I wound up rating this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It started my month off pretty well after Survive the Night. I was really hesitant to pick up any sort of thriller, pulse racing kind of read, but this really did turn it around for me and keep me going instead of hitting a slog. So I do have the Maidens to thank for that. But basically we're following the main character Mariana as she visits Cambridge University, I believe, where her niece Zoe is going. She's recently, I think a year ago, lost her partner, her husband, and hasn't taken to it very well. And when she gets onto campus, she is visiting her niece and she notices a Greek professor named Edward who is hosting a sort of commune of women students that dub themselves the Maidens, and slowly but surely the Maidens start to get killed or go missing, and Mariana thinks Edward is to blame for all of it. So it was very good. I liked the ending quite a lot. I felt like it was something that I don't see too much in thrillers, so definitely would recommend. Next, I read and finally finished Kingdom of Ash. So I am finished the Throne of Glass series. I would be holding it up. I do own it, but it is in, all of my box sets are at the very top of my bookshelves, and I just redid all of my bookshelves today, so I am not climbing up there to get it. But I really enjoyed this. I rated it 4 out of 5 star. I think it was the strongest that Sarah J. Maas has done in this Throne of Glass series. It was great. It kept me interested throughout the whole thing. It had the good character work and the plot development. There were a few times that I really was quite interested to see how things would turn out. I would say at no point was I particularly worried about any characters dying or anything like that, but it is a Sarah J. Maas novel, so I feel like that's kind of par for the course. I think she loves her characters as much as her audience does, so she has a hard time parting with them. But that small thing aside, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great way to end the series, and I really do hope that is the end of the series. It should be, but I looked online after and it said that there might be something else coming out. I hope not. I feel like it ended really well and we don't need another. Next, I read My Policeman. This is a movie that is being soon adapted into a movie that is starring Harry Styles. That's where the buzz is all coming from, and I really wanted to get my hands on it to see kind of what all the fuss is about. I will say, first, I rated this 4.5 out of 5 stars, so I really enjoyed it. That being said, I think this as a story is really going to surprise a lot of people. It is not what I thought it was going to be going into it. So we have a couple of perspectives within this story. Basically, we have Marion, who is the primary protagonist in our story. The story takes place in a set of letters. Marion meets Tom's sister when they're quite young, and through their teenage years she's quite besotted with Tom and kind of holds a flame for him until eventually they get married. Tom also meets a gentleman named Patrick, and Patrick runs like an art installment. This takes place in Brighton in the 60s, I believe, the 50s. So this is a time, obviously, where homosexuality was still illegal. There was a lot of societal taboos even around sexuality. And I appreciated this book for, I think, a lot of reasons that it might also turn people off of this book. So we never get Tom's perspective. Basically, we are stuck between two narrations of Marion, who has been infatuated with Tom since she was a young girl, and we only really get to see their relationship through her eyes without any sort of real character work attachment to her husband. She really paints him as she has an idea of who he is in her head, and he's just a warm body to fulfill that picture that she's painted in her mind. And on the other side of it, we have Patrick, who similarly, when he meets Tom, he feels a certain way about him and has all of these sort of higher thoughts that don't quite come into fruition at any point, but he has these ideas about Tom. So what I really appreciated about this book was, even though it's called My Policeman, it's a very apt title because both of the love interests of Tom, or the relationships that Tom finds himself in, both of them are really kind of sacrificing of Tom and what he wants and what he thinks. They just think they understand him better than anyone else in the world and really don't give him a chance to fulfill his own wishes in his own life. They just have an idea of him in their head, and that's what they base all of their motives and ideas off of. And I found that really fascinating. Just this idea of a sort of sex object or love interest that really is utilized by two oppositional love interests, and we just have Tom in the middle, who, for all intensive purposes, we don't really get to delve too far into how he is and what he thinks about anything. We get little glimpses of it from Marion's perspective and from Patrick's perspective, but that's about it. And I found that really fascinating, but I also think that's going to maybe sway a certain audience. I feel like the movie's been talked about in a different light, and it might disappoint a lot of people. It was a very gorgeous but very sad look into the 1950s and a struggle with sexuality and trying to fit in, and just very, very beautifully written. So next I read Mary Oliver's new and selected poems. I had a really good time with this. I was just feeling in the mood for poetry, and this caught my eye when I was at work and it was very sunny out. So I took my lunch, I bought this, took my lunch and sat outside with an iced tea and just went through it. I have flagged a couple of favorite poems and marked it up, but definitely a group of poetry I will be returning to. And it's Mary Oliver, who's one of my favorite poets. I rated that collection a 4 out of 5. Very good. And next is my 5-star read, which is House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is a reread for me. I read this last year and really enjoyed it. It's beautiful. It's really just about a world in which magical children are kept within like an orphanage kind of deal. Like the structure is magical children have to be looked after very carefully, so they're kept in close quarters under the eye of the government, and our protagonist, his job is to visit these different orphanages in which these kids are kept, and he gets called up to the 5th level, which no one in his line of work does. It's far above his station, and he gets sent on a special mission to go visit the house in the Cerulean Sea, which is to be kept his lips buttoned because these are magical children that are more dangerous than the normal ones he would visit. And it's honestly just like putting on a cozy sweater. It's just the sweetest book you will ever read. It's just so pure. It's so well-intentioned, and it is really good writing as well. And it's cute, and I love all the characters. Lucy's my favorite, who is the son of the devil and who is believed to bring about the end of the world. So we see this little like antichrist when he's a little boy, and he's just so funny, and it's just a beautiful portrayal of preconceived notions people have with children who are different, and maybe how certain people would treat them based on these prejudices, and it was just really gorgeous, and I would definitely recommend. Like I said, it was 5 out of 5 stars. It's just the book I grab when I need that little boost. I had read a few books that I really wasn't enjoying, so I picked this up and it gave me that little boost to finish out the month. It did a really good job. And last, I finished off the month right on the 31st by reading The Tenant of Windfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I really enjoyed this one. The Bronte sisters really hold a special place in my heart because Wuthering Heights is one of my favorite books of all time. I also really, really love Jane Eyre, not as a romance, but more as like a gothic horror. I read it when I was younger and it really terrified me, and every time I pick it up, it still holds that little bit of fear in me. I don't know, people that call that a romance, like, that's up to you, but I don't get it. So I read The Tenant of Windfell Hall, had a great time. I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I have really been in the mood for classics lately, and I will say, so basically we are following in this book, it's written in letters, and our main character, Gilbert, basically a woman moves into Windfell Hall, which is otherwise abandoned. Her name is Helen, and the family of Gilbert become associated with her, and he quickly becomes quite besotted with her, only to find that there's a lot surrounding her that's quite mysterious. And in the time in which this takes place, you basically can't be mysterious and be a woman, because that means you have a dark past, and a dark past means you can't get married. So she shows up at Windfell Hall with a young son and just one maid. This is a big manor that's kind of falling apart, so they only reopen a few of the rooms to live in. And as things kind of unfurl, he finds himself kind of falling down the rumors and the mystery that surrounds this woman that he's simultaneously falling in love with. About halfway through the book, we cut to a different perspective of Helen writing in her diaries, and we get to see exactly the history that she has come from. So the first kind of half, maybe third of the book, is just the rumors in the new neighborhood that she lives in, and then eventually she gives her diary to Gilbert to read, to kind of wash herself of the rumors, and we see just exactly what brought her to this circumstance. I really enjoyed it. At one point, we're like 80 pages into her letters, and it's just talking about a horrible marriage that she was in, and it's 80 pages of just how bad her marriage is, and I really enjoyed it. But it did remind me why maybe some people don't like classics, because it is so slow burn and slow pace that when I hit the 100-page mark within Helen's letters, or Helen's diary, I should say, of just why she's so miserable in her marriage, it's hard sometimes as a modern woman to not just be like, well, just leave him, just go. What do you still do? You are making me miserable with how miserable you are. But I really enjoy classics. I don't mind the slow burn. I have quite a good time with them, and I really wound up enjoying this. And I think I just have the Villette Girls. I think that's the title of it, or Villette. I can't quite remember. And then I read all of the Bronte works, so I'm quite happy with that. And that is it for the month of July. I was pretty happy with the numbers. Again, some of the worst books I've read, but you can't win them all. So with that being said, I will see you guys in my next video.